We do want to move on to everything stock charts. This is an exciting segment where we do find out a lot of tips and tricks on how you can better use the StockCharts website. And for that, we have brought in none other than Bill Shelby. What do you got for us?
I'm going to go over annotations. It's something that everybody sees, you and Aaron, as well as all the commentators use these all the time for charts. Maybe some people haven't played with them as much, so we're going to do a very high level. There's so many of them, we can't really cover them in depth, but we're going to go through just how to start up the annotations, look at the toolbars and the settings. We'll go through as many of the individual tools as we can, again, probably at a fairly high level, kind of quickly. And then I'll show some keyboard tips and tricks on how to do some special little features with some of the annotations.
All right, sounds good.
All right, so everybody's familiar with our workbench, and I just brought up a random stock here this morning, and we can get to the annotation tool by scrolling down. And we have this toolbar here on the very far left corner. We can annotate. We can click that. When we do that, we get two little toolbars. We get a bar on the top, which has a number of settings for the tools themselves. You can see line widths and styles, corners, font controls. These are sorts of things that control the look and the feel of the individual annotations. We have our color picker, which we'll go into a little bit more later. And we've got your most recently used colors. So if you use a specific set of colors over and over, you can very quickly attach a color to something. You'll notice that as we go through the tools, this toolbar will change up here to the context of whichever tool we're using. So obviously we're drawing a trend line. We don't need to see the font size, et cetera, et cetera. So as we go through the tools, you'll see that the toolbar on top, the settings will change to be specific to what that tool can be used for. And so might as well dive right in. The section over here, we've got the ability to select our tools. We'll get into that, obviously. We've got lines here, text, basic shapes, studies. These are a little bit more complicated, and some of them use the underlying data to make the drawings. So we'll get into those. And then we've got just more of the general controls. You'll see this is how to save a chart. This will turn red if you haven't saved it yet. So you've basically had unsaved work. This is an undo feature here, if you like to just back through what you've done. If you like to just delete everything, and I'll be using that a bit because I'll be messing up the chart, and it's easier for me to just blast everything and start from scratch than to undo everything. You can just delete everything. And then we'll have a help screen here. This will show us a lot of the tips and tricks I'm going to be talking about. We'll be going through them a little quick. So if you can't remember, was it Control or Shift that he did? This dialog box here, which we'll show in a few minutes, we'll show you all of those. So we'll get started. Trendline is one of the most popular. It's pretty much just drag and drop these sorts of things. You can then move them around. You can grab the handles and move here. One of our first tricks is if you hold the Shift key down and click, you can toggle the heads. You can see up here our menu will change as well for our menu state, is to turn that on or off. A lot of times what we'll do, we can go back and select, is we'll say we'll want to create a trend line for a section. So instead of trying to make two perfectly parallel lines and then drawing a second one, we can basically duplicate this. And there's a couple ways we can do that. We can go here and we can hit, in my case, I'm on a Mac, so I'll be saying Command. If you're on a Windows machine, it will be Control. We can hit Command D, which is duplicate. You can create an exact copy of this line, same angles. It takes a little bit of practice, but if you hold the Command key down and drag, you can create another copy. Again, this takes a little bit of practice to kind of get the timing right. We can go back and undo to back out of that. Command Z is also a keyboard shortcut for undoing. We can go back there. If we hold the Command key down and draw and drag one of our handles, we'll create a perfectly horizontal or perfectly vertical line. If you want to make sure it's absolutely perfect. I call this the Greg Schnell feature because when I was creating this feature, it was not quite working properly for a long time, and Greg would let me know every release that I still hadn't got it right. I think I've finally gotten it right. So that'll allow you to create perfect shapes. I'll hit my delete here. We'll clean up our palette. The rest of these horizontal and vertical lines are pretty much exactly what you would suspect. They just drag with no ability to change the height or the width. You just basically can drag them up and down. You'll see on the left there, you can get the exact number, and then when you let up, it'll disappear. But when you're dragging, you can get the value. Up here, we can change the line styles. We can change the thickness. We can change the color by simply clicking on our color control. We've got support and resistance, which is red and green, showing when the price is above or below a line. I know that this is a popular one. A lot of people use this, so people are probably familiar with this guy. And our final line is a parabola. And this is one of the few, we have 2 or 3 tools that are created by multiple clicks. So you click 3 times, and then it will fill out the parabola. You can drag any portion of this control, so here are the 3 points, and we'll redo the parabola based on those values there. Moving on to the text, another couple of popular ones are the text notes. We can basically here start just typing text. We can move this here. We've got sort of a transparent background. We can control the size of the box, which doesn't matter much now because it's a relatively short string of text, but it will control where the text is wrapped. We can increase our font size, and you see we'll eventually start to wrap. We can make it bold. Move the font back down. We can move these all over wherever we want. Normally, in most cases, the annotation will be stuck to the date. So as the time moves on, obviously everything on the left of the chart will slowly move to the left and will eventually fall off the edge, and you won't see it. If you'd like to keep it in place, you can use this pin button up here. And that means now that particular item will always stay in this. So essentially, the chart will now flow underneath this, and this piece, this text note, will stay in the same spot every time. That's using the pin. Not all of the annotations are allowed to be pinned. So again, if it's available, it will show up on the menu. The call outs are a little bit different. They can be used for a number of things. One of the things I use them for is just to keep track of when I've bought something. So I may do something like this. I'll say, okay, I've bought 100 shares. I'll actually decrease my font size. Put this over here, and then we can use the control, or in my case, the command button, to drag on a handle, and we can create the call out pointer, and this will snap to the nearest location on the box. So what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I bought 100 shares here, and I'll use this to just track my trade. And as I buy and sell, I'll just create these little call outs to remind me sort of where I've put in buys and sells. Another thing I use this for, because I don't have a lot of time to pay attention to what's going on. I'm so busy working with other things that I can't keep an eye on the market. I'll use this to remind myself of important things, and I'll pin that there. So because obviously earnings is something that can cause a huge variation in price, and if I want to be aware that I need to maybe think about getting out of something before earnings, or maybe I want to buy some insurance, whatever, this is just a great way for me that I use personally to just remind myself that, you know, we are coming up on earnings. We're going to be seeing that over the next few weeks. So it's something I need to really be aware of if I'm holding something that's an individual stock as opposed to XLE as an ETF. We've got just the little arrows. Those are just probably the most basic control. We've got a price, which will create a little mini call out box with the price at wherever you typed it or clicked it. We've got a percentage change set of bars that will tell you the percentage difference between 2 levels. And for this next one is going to take a bit of space, so I'm going to go clear everything off again. And this whole section here is devoted to Elliott Wave, and we could probably spend an entire session on Elliott Wave, and I don't purport to know much of anything about Elliott Waves. But we've got all of the various cycles and super cycles, And essentially, this is another multi-click section. You can just, successive clicks will walk you through the Elliott Wave series. So if you're into Elliott Waves and you know all about Elliott Waves, you can use this to just walk through and click the locations of the next wave and be able to plot that. We'll get into shapes. Rectangles, fairly straightforward. You can drag the directions anywhere you want. Again, this is one of the ones that has a shortcut. If you hold the Shift key down on this, you can create a perfect square that's always going to be the exact same size on any side. If you want to go free form, you can, of course, go and drag it to wherever you like. If you hold your Command or Control key down on these corners, you can rotate it. I know Arthur will use this to sort of highlight a channel. You can go here again. Another thing we can do is we can fill the box. Now, obviously, that's not particularly useful. So if we go up to our color control, not only can we choose our color, but we can choose the transparency of this control here. So we can make that slightly more transparent. And I know from having done Arthur's show webinars a couple of years ago, Arthur will often use this to sort of show where maybe an area of resistance is or support. And maybe this is something that in the middle of that period there where GE was around the $17 range, we could mark this and say, well, if we fall out of this box, then we've got problems. Of course, we did fall out of that box in late January on strong volume. So that might be just a way to mark an area of support or an area that you have a particular interest in. And going back, our next one is an ellipse, which is also can be a circle. If we, same sort of thing, if we hold the Shift key, we can drag and create a perfect circle. We can change our color, go back and highlight, change our color, or we can go back to moving it into whatever shape we want. Triangle is another one of our multi-click creations. So we click 3 separate points, and we have our triangle there. And we'll reselect it here. We can duplicate it again by dragging, clicking Control and dragging a corner. And on our rectangle, another I believe we can create is if we hold down the Control while we create the triangle or the rectangle while we're creating it, it will automatically fill it. We can also round the corners on the rectangles, which is kind of hard to see when it's selected because of the control points there, but you can see here when it's not selected, you can have rounded corners. You can switch those. And I'll clear us again. Now we get into the studies, and there's a lot of these, and these are a little bit more specific to the data themselves. So one of the fairly common ones is the Fibonacci. I'll change this to a little bit darker color. We've got our lines here. We'll get our actual calculations based on the underlying data, these numbers over here. This is another one that has a keyboard shortcut with it. If you take this and you use the Command key, you'll notice that we get an extra set. We'll have to scrunch this down to get the top one. There we go. We have 160 shows up, as well as this 23. We can, again, click and drag to increase or decrease the number of Fibonacci lines there. And we go through some more of these. We have quadrant lines. Again, these are specific to the data underneath. As we drag this, you'll note that the values are recalculated based on the underlying data. Fibonacci arcs. Fibonacci arc is another one. If we hold down the Command and drag, we'll get that fourth inner circle there. It just disappeared and reappeared. Fibonacci Timezones. These are set. They're static, and so they will always be the same number of periods. If we scroll down, we can see, it's maybe a little hard to see, but you can see the numbers here, 21, 34, 55. So these are at preset locations. They'll always be that way. You can really only just drag the primary end point here. If you want customizable lines, You'll notice as well that as I scroll, this control stays in place. So if I had a really tall chart, I can scroll all the way to the bottom, not have to go all the way back to the top to select something. Cycle lines let you do the similar sorts of things to the Fibonacci, although these are user-defined, so you can drag them to whatever length you want. Again, hard to see on this display. You can see the number of periods down here at the bottom. You can control that to wherever you want. You can move these to wherever you want. So a little bit more control than the Fibonacci. Again, all these we'll put a lot of drawing on the screen there. I'll just get rid of those. Circles are very similar. You can just drag the size wherever you want. I always think this looks like Homer Simpson. That's Homer's head. You can drag these anywhere you want to identify various cycles. We've got sine waves. You can drag those wherever you want. You can change the amplitude and the frequency. Then we can get into more of the data tools. The RAF regression channel is just a linear regression. Again, it recalculates based on the data underneath, so you'll see the size change based on the distance between the top and the lowest bar, as well as the angle of the price in terms of the regression line. This is one, Tom, we were talking about earlier. This is another 3-point creation tool, the Andrews pitchfork. You can create 3 clicks, and once get the 3rd click, we draw the tool. You can then change all sorts of various options and directions of the pitchfork. Fibonacci Fan is another Fibonacci that we can hold the Shift key down. Excuse me, the Command key. So we'll go and start over. These are getting a little messy. We can get that 4th line there if we hold the Command key down for the Fibonacci's. A newest one, this is one of the ones we've just recently added. We were working with Scott Carney. He was on the show maybe a month ago. It's called XABCD. This is a 5-point creation tool. So we can click. This allows us to get the XABCD process, and usually this is transparent. So I'll go back up to my sort of a transparent color here to let us see the values underneath. And if you listen to his presentation, you can look at some of the harmonics. You can position these points on the chart to show specific points of resistance and buy points, sell points. We've got some ratios here. I'll defer this to Chart School. Again, if you want to get more information on the specifics of the pitchfork or the RAF regression, Chart School is the place to go. If there's interest, we can do a little bit more of a deep dive, but some of those topics can take a lot of time. So I'm just going to gloss over this just to show the basics of the annotations. Some of the tools, since they are working with the underlying data, you really want to be fairly precise. I don't know if you've noticed, but at the bottom of the price panel over here in the left, as I move the cursor, it's a sort of a mini inspector. I've got the open, high, low, close, and volume, as well as the value of the Y chart. In this case, that's the price. As I move the cursor, I can get that value. So if I want to move some of these handle points to very specific points, I can use this display down at the bottom and know that I'm going absolutely for August 21st. So there, I've got it. And this will be true of any of the panels we can see down here. On the MACD, we've got the value and the date. It sort of changes based on whether it's a price panel or just an indicator panel. And then finally, our last one are speed lines. Again, we talked about this. If we want to save the chart, we can upload it. We can select which list we want to put it in. We can change the name. We can then upload it. I'm not going to save that now. Here's our help. It goes over all the basic tools, which we talked about saving and unsaving. We've got some of our global hotkeys. One of the things we didn't really go through is if you want to circulate through your annotations, you can use the tab and shift tab, just much like you would use in Windows Control tab to go iterate through your applications. You can iterate through your annotations this way. And then here's all of these command and clicks and drags and shifts and all those. The help, it will determine whether you're on a Mac or a PC and automatically change that command to either command or control, depending upon which machine you're on. I'm on a Mac right now, so all of mine are command. But if you're on Windows, those would all say control. So that's just a reiteration of all of the tips and tricks there for all of the keyboard items. And then finally, to get out, we've got our little X over here. We'll just click this. I'm not going to save. And then we're back out to our regular chart. And that's sort of a very quick overview. Any of the specifics there, I would suggest people go to Chart School, as pretty much everything if you want more information. Chart School's got a wealth of information on all of those tools. Like say, if there's interest, we can take some time to maybe deep dive into a specific one as to how to use the specific tool in conjunction with the data on the chart. And that's pretty much the overview. It's a little bit fast and furious. There's a lot there, but figured we would just do this as a high-level intro, and then we can maybe dive into some more specifics on another show.
Yeah, I was looking, Bill, at the as you were going through all the tools, trying to find out whether or not GE's a buy.
I haven't written the buy tool yet.
We did a couple of questions that we pretty much answered in the chat box, but one that I don't know: can you delete a call out handle? So you know how I know I've done this where I've created like 3 and I only meant to have like 2. I just hide them, but is there a way to just delete one of those?
Yeah, I don't think there's a way to delete the call out handles. Usually I would just recreate them. My personal style is I don't end up with tons of handles. So I'd like to say I just usually point out prices. So I'll just usually recreate one.
Right. Yeah. Or if I'm in a hurry, like I said, I'll just hide it under the call out.
Right. Just put the point behind the call out.
I've done the same thing.
Yeah. I just get a little too excited on drawing those, and then I realize, oh, this chart looks a little bit confusing.
You can overdo the annotations. Some people, I've seen some charts that are so covered with annotations, it's amazing to be able to make heads or tails of it. So a lot of times I would suggest if you start to get charts that have tons and tons of annotations, you can create multiple charts. We have people will have charts that will have annotations that will stretch for years. And of course, there is a limit to the number of annotations. And at some point, we'll have to just start removing old annotations. In those cases, if you want to keep long history, what I would suggest doing is to create a separate chart, and you can then create a date range. And then you'll be able to always go back to that chart. So one of the things I was talking about with my charts, I'll put in buys and sells. So I'll track a trade, and maybe at the end I'll put a call out box that says, okay, I bought for this, sold for that. Here's my percentage gain or loss. Any notes, I use it as almost like a trader's journal. And then when I'm done with it, I can create a date range to save it, and then I'll put it in a chart list that's, say, 2018 closed trades, and I can go back and review them.
Makes sense.
Yeah, really interesting.
Any other questions, Aaron?
Let's see. I mean, some of them were already answered, but as far as Fibonacci levels, and again, our trusty customer service folks in the back have answered it already in the chat box, but since people can't always see that, the question was, let's see if I can find the actual question. It was about Fibonacci and changing the percentages.
Yes, there's always requests for more and more Fibonacci lines. So what we've got so far, we're probably going to keep for a while. I know we added the that extra 160 and the 22. I think obviously there's a number of additional ones that could be added. At this point, we don't really have any plans to add a whole lot more of the retracement Fibonacci values.
Sure. Let's see. Yeah, they wanted to change them from...
Right.
Yeah.
We really just have the ability to toggle those extras on. There's no real way to say I want to make a change from the 67 to 62 or what change, an arbitrary line number or percentage number.
Right. Those were really, I think you must have done a great job because we really didn't get too many questions. We did get a question asking for the link to the Chart School article on chart notes. So I will put that in the Market Watchers Live blog for you to go to, and you can look up more of these. But I have to say, I learned quite a bit.
And we do have a link here on this little help dialog down here. Click here for more help.
Oh, there you go.
And so there's our chart notes overview. And I would suggest going through it. It is there's a lot here, and we've just kind of blasted over it. And I hope that people maybe have seen some little tips and tricks or tools they didn't really realize were there or didn't know how they work. But if you want to spend a little bit more time and go in and kind of research it, definitely scroll through the help topic up here. There's tons of things to recap because we did kind of have to skip over a lot of this stuff fairly quickly to try and cover as much as possible.
Indeed. All right.
Great.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us today, Bill.
Yeah.
Very informative as always. Thanks again. And